Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Babergh Licensing and Regulatory Committee. I am Councillor Margaret Maybury, Chairman of the Licensing and Regulatory Committee, and I will be chairing the meeting today. May I first remind you all of some of the domestic arrangements. Please ensure that you maintain social distance from all other persons whilst in the chamber and the communal areas. Please ensure that you wear a face mask or face covering at all times unless you are seated or if you are exempt from doing so, and that you use the hand sanitizer and wipes provided. You will be invited to speak and ask questions by the chair. Please do not interrupt other speakers. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please ensure mobile phones are on silent or switched off. Additionally, we will be using e-voting on the modern.gov app for this meeting. Please could members therefore ensure they are logged in and ready to use the app. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Thank you. I now introduce the members who are here today. The officers in particular attending the meeting are Catherine Green, Licensing Officer to my right, Kay Sanders, Licensing Officer who's now moved to the second tier, Nigel DeLue, Legal Officer to my left, Karen Sayer, Governance Officer behind me to my left. We also have Emma Richbell on the tier 2. We have the Corporate Manager on tier 3 alongside the Chief Executive of Babergh District Council. And I thank them all for attending. I will now move on to the agenda. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies, please? Karen.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Creswell, Councillor Grandon, Councillor Newman and Councillor Nunn, and Councillor Dawson has advised that she may arrive late.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will add that there are quite a few absentees today from members. Sadly, some are unwell, and I send my best wishes to them. Item 2, declaration of interest by councillors. Are there any declarations? Yes, Councillor Beer.
Sorry. Just on your previous point, Councillor Newman did ask me to point out that the reason he couldn't make it this afternoon is that Friday afternoons is very difficult for him to get away. He was under the impression it was Friday morning, but I know you're going to look into that anyway. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Beer. I am looking at the timings of these meetings, and thank you for pointing that out. Thank you. Any declarations of interest by councillors? No, thank you. I will move on to item 3, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of August 2021. Would councillors like... Thank you. Councillor Carpenter, you have something, please?
I just propose the minutes are accepted.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We've had a proposal, and the seconder is Councillor Beer. Thank you very much. The Governance Officer will now conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, please can you open the vote in the modern.gov app by clicking on the plus sign in the top right of the agenda screen. The vote for this item will now show in blue.
Councillor Ayres, thank you for saying that you wish to abstain. That's quite a moot point, actually, because councillors can vote for minutes.
I believe
Thank you.
even if you weren't attending previously, you can vote for the minutes.
Thank you. That's our legal officer who's just given a decision on that. Thank you. That's a very grey area that you can actually vote on minutes even if you were not attending. It really depends on how you feel, but thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's 3 votes for and 2 abstentions. You would like to change yours to a 4? So that's 4, 4 and 1 abstention, Chair.
Thank you very much. The minutes have now been confirmed and will be signed at the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. Item 4 is to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you very much. We move on to item 5, which is questions by councillors. Are there any, please?
None received, Chair.
Thank you very much. And item 6 on the agenda is BLR/21/8. It's the Gambling Act 2005, Statement of Principles, Statutory 3-year revision. I will now invite the Licensing Officer, Catherine, to introduce the report to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to report back to the Licensing and Regulatory Committee the outcome of a full, targeted and public consultation which ran between the 20th of August 2021 and the 16th of September 2021 in respect of the above statutory policy revision relating to Gambling Act 2005 functions. This report seeks the approval by the Licensing and Regulatory Committee of the revised principal statement, now attached as Appendix A, for recommendation on to full council, so that it may be adopted for publication and ready to take effect from the 31st of January 2022. This is a statutory requirement to review and re-adopt the Council's gambling policy. A summary of the changes made brought to this committee on the 16th of August 2021 from the 2019 statement to the redraft is attached to this report as Appendix B. The 6th edition of the Statement of Principles, once approved and adopted, shall take effect for a 3-year period from the 31st of January 2022, although it may be revised sooner if necessary. It will then become a primary point of reference for councillors, officers, applicants, and other responsible or interested parties. Following the consultation exercise, Babergh received 1 response, and this is attached to this report as Appendix C. From the responses received, there are no further necessary changes which need to be made to the draft Statement of Principles. Therefore, the recommendation is that the post-consultation draft Statement of Principles in respect of Gambling Act 2005 functions, as attached at Appendix A, be approved, and that the committee makes recommendation to full council that the Statement of Principles document be adopted. This concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I would just like to comment that the one response that we did receive was from Be Gamble Aware. So they have actually made a comment about how gambling interacts with society. So thank you for that. Are there any questions for the Licensing Officer, please, from members? Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I, first of all, I've been through this and I can remember way back 2014, 12, it could even have been earlier, when we took over the gambling bits and pieces. Does this include casinos in our area? Is that reference in this document? Because I've been through it and I couldn't actually see it, but I know we haven't got any casinos in our area. But would that be amongst this if we did have them?
Councillor Beer, I can answer that.
Right.
The licences for casinos are allocated by government, and we do not have a licence for any casinos in Babergh or in Mid-Suffolk. So that's a policy that does not currently apply to Babergh.
And my next question is, could I ask through you to the officers, is there anything in particular because when I went through it, I could see the bits that had been crossed out and what had been added, and that seemed sort of like updating. But is there anything that you consider of great importance that we should be very aware of? I know it's putting the emphasis on you, but you know, when you start reading this at the beginning and you get to the end of it all, you've forgotten what the first part was.
Catherine,
Thank
please
you.
respond.
Yeah, if I may. Thank you, Chair. So in regards to the summary of changes, we took into account the guidance submitted by the Gambling Commission that they give to licensing authorities. It's very minimal changes. A lot of the amendments that have been made are past grammatical errors and potential header errors. If I may refer back to your original question about casinos as well, we do reference them in our statement of principles, but as Councillor Mabry quite rightly said, there is no allocation left available for casinos nationally, so therefore it's not too much of an issue for the Babergh district.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carpendale.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just be assured that, in fact, there's no material difference in this version of the policy from the previous policy that we have, and it is just very small adjustments? And in that sense also, is there any material change to the context in which the policy has been put together? I.e., has the environment of gambling changed?
Catherine, please respond.
Thank you, Chair. As far as the team are aware, the gambling provisions we have currently available hasn't changed dramatically in our district. We have very low levels of gambling. The changes that were made, as I say, were in conjunction with those that were proposed under the guidance from the Gambling Commission. So we've not gone too far outside of that.
Thank you, Catherine. Would we like to open this up to debate? Councillor Beer? Would anyone like to debate this paper? No? Thank you. Councillor Beer has proposed the officer's recommendations, and the seconder is Councillor Carpendale. And we can vote, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, can you please open the vote in the modern.gov app? And the vote for this agenda item will now show in blue.
Councillors, would you like to be reminded of what we're voting for? Are you all quite happy? All quite happy? Thank you very much.
That's 5 votes for, Chair.
Thank you very much, Karen. Governance Officer has declared that that's a unanimous vote. So thank you very much. Item 7 on the agenda is BLR/21/9 New Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Licensing Policy. I will now invite the Licensing Officer, Catherine, to introduce the report to the committee. Please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to report back to the Licensing and Regulatory Committee the outcome of a full, targeted and public consultation which ran between the 20th of August 2021 and the 16th of September 2021 in respect of the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Licensing Policy for the controlled zone of Babergh District Council. Following the publication of the new statutory standards for taxis and private hire vehicles, councils are required to review the recommendations from the Department for Transport and consult on any changes to the current policies. On the 21st of July 2020, the DFT published its long-awaited statutory standards for taxi and private hire licensing. The new standards brought in a raft of recommendations and requirements which councils must have regard to in exercising their functions under Hackney Carriage and private hire vehicle licensing. The standards also replaced relevant sections of the best practice guidance issued by the DFT in 2010, Where there is a conflict between the standards and best practice, the standards will take precedence. The DFT will update its best practice guidance for councils in due course. However, in the meantime, it expects councils to adopt its recommendations in the new standards document, so that past failings of some licensing regimes are never repeated. Whilst the focus of the new statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards is on protecting children and vulnerable adults, all passengers will benefit from the recommendations contained in it. There is consensus that common core minimum standards are required to better regulate the taxi and private hire vehicle sector. The overarching aim of the statutory standards is public protection. Adoption of the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Licensing Policy is a function reserved for Cabinet. Following the consultation exercise, Babergh received 14 responses, and these are attached to this report as Appendix B. Officers' responses to the comments from consultees are attached to this report as Appendix C, and for ease of reference, some common themes have been colour-coded. From the responses received, the changes made are attached as Appendix D. Therefore, the recommendations are as follows: that the post-consultation draft Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Licensing Policy, attached as Appendix A, be approved, and that the committee makes recommendation to Cabinet that the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Licensing Policy document be adopted. And this concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for that. Members, are there any questions that you would like to raise for Catherine at the moment? Councillor Coppendale, thank you.
Thank you. I believe that in the very large response to the responses, there were some comments that changes might actually be made to the document. Is that right? And if so, can we just accept that they will be made?
Yes, the changes that we're proposing are all listed under Appendix D. So we've also gone through the policy as well and highlighted anything we were taking out in red. We've read and struck it out, and anything we're adding is in blue. So the policy under Appendix A and the summary document of Appendix D are basically across the board, and if you are to approve that, they will be made, yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. Any other questions from members? No? Councillor Beer?
Thank you. Yes, that reminded me when Councillor Carpendale said something then. One of the responses on page 116, you know, is that relevant? They're saying that by introducing this new policy, it's going to make life very difficult and more expensive for them to replace their vehicles because of the disabled wheelchair accessibility, that they've got to conform with. I thought this only happened if you had over a certain amount of vehicles. Am I wrong here? Perhaps you can help me out.
Councillor Catherine, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We amend, as part of the policy review, we've amended a condition as part of the policy that any vehicle that is going to be 8 seats will be wheelchair accessible as well over both private hire and Hackney Carriage. This was due to responses we received from the Suffolk Disability Forum, who did a survey for us, and the result of that was that a lot of disabled people prefer to pre-book with an operator, and there is a lacking in terms of wheelchair accessible vehicles in the private hire vehicle sector.
Sorry, Madam Chairman. So we're actually forcing them to comply with this?
I wouldn't say forcing. You can still have a larger vehicle, but you can opt for 7 seats and not have to follow the wheelchair accessibility requirement. It's just they're saying if you want an 8-seater vehicle, it needs to also be wheelchair accessible.
But according to this particular person responding, that would be more expensive for them if they had to go for a 7-seater rather than an 8-seater. So it does seem a little bit hard, but I know we have to move and I know we have to take this on board, but I wonder whether we're being a bit heavy-handed.
If I may,
Yes.
Chair.
So carry on.
quite a significant number of Hackney carriage proprietors already own wheelchair accessible vehicles because of the current stipulations anyway. We've saturated the Hackney carriage market with very large wheelchair accessible vehicles, and as per the Disability Forum response, not many disabled people from the responses received are using the Hackney carriage rank space. So this is hopefully going to level out the market, as it were.
Could I just follow on from that, Madam Chairman? Did we have many comments from members of the public who are in this category saying that they couldn't get the taxis because of the, they weren't adaptable enough? I mean, it's all very well for an organisation to come forward and say they want this, but if the actual resident out there, wheelchair resident, isn't complaining to us about it, and they haven't really responded from what I could see going through this, do we still need to do this to this degree? I suppose that's my bottom line.
Catherine, respond. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. The organisation did a pre-consultation with all of their members as part of the Suffolk Disability Forum, and they shared the results with us. We're not able to provide that because it was all done as a confidential survey with regards to their members, but they fed that back to us so that we were able to be fully informed with our policy. As I say, we don't feel that it's too harsh a condition because at the moment they're already being forced to buy a wheelchair accessible vehicle for any vehicles that are plated 21 and over. Therefore, by having this condition, it gives them a little bit more leeway as to what vehicles that they will use. And if you desperately want the 8-seater, we don't feel it's too unnecessary to ask for it to be wheelchair accessible.
Thank you,
Sorry
Catherine.
to come back
Councillor,
again,
come back.
but
Please do.
I don't think you've actually answered my question. I take your point, I understand where you're coming from, but if we're not getting members of the public who need wheelchairs and what have you, if they're not coming forward telling us that the taxis they're using can't provide this, why are we going down this road to this degree? That's my point. If you can say to me, yes, we do know of many people who have complained that they haven't been able to get a taxi with that, that's a different story. But if we're saying, well, this is what should be happening, and if they get an 8-seater, they've got to have this wheelchair accessibly friendly, but no one's going to use it.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm actually going to respond here, if that's all right, and Catherine will help me out. This policy will be for the next few years, and really it is trying to anticipate the future need as well as the need at the moment. I understand where you're coming from. It would always be really good if members of the public actually responded to the items that we're trying to raise and that we're trying to, for want of a better word, level out. But sadly, we haven't had them without the confidential report, so we cannot include them. It's always very difficult to balance out the needs of those who perhaps may talk loudly and those who may talk quietly. And I think this is the way that probably we will be helping those who may not wish to draw attention to the fact that they are less abled. And this is a way forward. Catherine, would you like to add anything to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've not received any responses from any members of the public, but we found through other policy reviews that we've done that we don't really get any, if at all, from members of the public. So we felt that the fact that at least some people had managed to contribute via the Suffolk Disability Forum was enough to really inform us in regards to reviewing the policy.
And if I may add to help you, Councillor Beer, it has been reported to me that some less able people actually prefer to use a saloon car because they find it easier to get into an exit, enter and exit. So I think that this balancing act helps to make sure that we have the vehicles on the road for trade that can be used for wheelchair users who cannot remove themselves with a wheelchair. But there are also the saloon cars that those who are less abled may like to use. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Ayres, missed you. I beg your pardon.
Response 10, and response 9, about drivers having to take a BTEC qualification. There seems to be quite a bit of trouble about that, particularly we're looking for drivers now. Would you like to give us some information on that, please, Catherine?
Thank you, Councillor. The BTEC is being proposed in a way to fully qualify all drivers across the board in the necessary information that they need to know. The safeguarding standards have brought in the requirement of needing to know safeguarding, in particular child exploitation and county lines. And there's also the need for disability awareness, which the course will encompass. I know that there is also responses that state that they've been drivers for a while, so what would be the need? But it just means that if everybody undertakes that, they'll all be at the same level.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to respond on this. Quite a few of the responses that we've had from the taxi trade have actually covered this point, that they have been taxi drivers for many years, and we thank them for their service to the community. And they are a bit concerned about having perhaps to do this training. I think it's fair to point out that this is a statutory requirement laid down by government. It's not something that we can bypass, even if we would wish to. I will add, and this is going to be controversial, and I have spoken to the team, that perhaps we as a council should be looking at, for 1 year only, to perhaps subsidise the amount of money that they have to pay for this training for 1 year only, and it is something that I will be asking the Cabinet to actually look at. The current cost for this BTEC, which is over 2 days, so obviously taxi drivers are going to lose money for 2 days, the actual cost is £150. We have, I think we calculated about 200 licensed taxi drivers within the district, so that would amount to about £30,000 if the council would consider ever subsidising the amount that they have to pay. This is something that we can perhaps recommend to Cabinet, and it is up to other members to see if they are in agreement with this. It doesn't actually have to be the 100%, it could be a percentage, but for 1 year only, and that would be my recommendation. Would members like to comment on that, please? Oh, Councillor Beer, I think you missed me.
I've got a question before I come to that.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Is this test refresher course every 3 years or 5 years? That's the first part.
It's every 3 years.
Every 3. Well, I don't consider that's too unreasonable. In my previous life, I had to take a test every 4 years, and then it was about £350 a time. And I was always believed that you could always learn something, pick something new up, and sometimes we just get a little bit, you know, we've done it so much, you just forget some of the things that you shouldn't forget.
Complacent.
Yeah, that's the word, complacent, thank you. Yes, I don't think we can give sort of grandfather rights, but I do think 3 years is rather too short. I would like that to be a bit longer. I think if someone's done a refresher course, which they should be encouraged to do, say every 4 years or 5 years, that should be sufficient. And because, you know, it does take time out of your working day, and I had to pay all my own costs myself, and that was sometimes a couple of days. It was very expensive then. Heaven knows what it is now in that particular industry. But yes, I do have some sympathy here that I feel, yes, the test and the refresher course is useful, and I don't think any of them would really object to that because you can always learn something. But I think the time of 3 years should be increased to at least 4.
Thank you, Councillor Beer, and we appreciate your experience within the motor industry, I'm going to call it, or the motor services, so thank you very much. I believe that's a statutory 3-year period. I'll ask Catherine to confirm. I may have got it wrong.
I don't believe it to be a statutory 3-year period. The reasoning behind the setting of the 3 years is when you are issued a driver badge, it runs for a 3-year period. So we were hoping to do the 3-year period with a refresher course at the end of their 3rd year. That way it would fall in line with when we're doing renewals. I understand wholeheartedly what you're saying there about making it a little bit longer. It just would then fall outside of their normal everyday renewal.
But, Madam Chairman, that wouldn't... Yes, it would fall outside that, but it's not impossible for us to accommodate that. And I'd still like to say we should go to at least 4 years. My field was teaching people to drive and examining them and all that, and they felt 4 years was adequate there. Okay. I would have thought that 4 years for a taxi driver who's doing the same thing basically all the time it should be the minimum.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beer, for that comment. Have any other members any questions for Catherine before we go into debate, please? No? Thank you. So we will move into debate, and I'm going to ask members if they have any thoughts on what Councillor Beer has proposed tentatively at the moment. Councillor Ayres, thank you.
I think it's a sound suggestion about them having some paid towards it, or maybe the taxi company. I mean, you've got big taxi companies and you've got the odd individuals. So I don't know quite how we would even that out. But yes, I do think they need help, and you always need updating. I will admit I had a speeding fine recently, and I did the online course, and I learned a lot, having driven for years. So it doesn't do anyone any harm to, to update their knowledge. And I learned a lot on this course. So.
Thank you very much for your honesty there, Councillor Ayres, because we can all learn something from training. It's never wasted at all. Is there anyone else any comments for debate? Councillor Gould, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Training is always good, isn't it? And it's frequently not until you've done it that you realised how much you needed it. You don't realise how much you need it before you've done it sometimes. Am I right in thinking that the licence is up for renewal every 3 years? So it would make sense for this to level peg with that, in my opinion, rather than have something else tagged on after 4 years, which is all a bit messy on the timeline, I think. In terms of the suggestion for subsidies, this is moving the goalposts, isn't it? The BTEC is moving the goalposts. So I think it would be sound good practice to offer a subsidy whilst there is that changeover period, because these taxi drivers would have started their job without having to do this, and this is something new that has been added. So it does seem to me it would be sound good practice to somehow subsidise it, whether it's subsidised across the board or whether, as you say, Councillor, as some of the bigger companies might be able to stand the extra expenditure more easily than some of the others, but not necessarily, because some big companies have cash flow problems as well, don't they? So whether it could be a subsidy that's there that people have to claim, that of course comes with it all the sort of negative stuff about having to claim a subsidy, where if it's across the board it's much more inclusive. Those would be my thoughts, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gould. Councillor Carpendale, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a bit tricky and likely to get a bit messy. Existing drivers, if they have to take the test more or less now, presumably they're some way through their 3-year licence. So at which point, when they start to have a renewal, 3 years from one test to another, it doesn't sound very clear to me. When if you can help me.
Catherine's going to answer that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the intention is once the policy's been adopted, we would then look on each driver's 3-yearly renewal to require them to go for the test. So then it would put them into their 3-year cycle accordingly.
Just following
Yes,
that,
please,
Chairman,
please come back.
in a sense, that kind of means that existing drivers would not need to take that test straight away. They'd only need to take it at renewal, which perhaps puts a slightly different light on it. I've got some sympathy with what you're saying, Chair, but it might be that we simply want to say to Cabinet, would they consider, rather than actually recommending, because, you know, finding 30,000, we all know what the situation is.
Thank you, Councillor, for your comments on that. Thank you. Any other debate on this, please? No. So, to move forward, and I'm going to ask the Governance Officer for her thoughts on this. We have the recommendations for this. Do we need to actually put in another recommendation, or could we ask our legal advisor, please?
Are you asking to, on the basis that there's a proposed amendment to the recommendation, or are you looking for a proposal for the original?
Thank you. I'm actually asking for, if we can, to do an addition that we ask Cabinet to actually look at discounting the BTECs. I don't know how we can do this, so I'm looking at you, hopefully.
I can see you looking at me. Well, could I just,
yes,
before you go on,
yes,
the proposal regarding the subsidy doesn't really affect the policy itself, does it? The requirement is that they take these qualifications and,
yes,
and they acquire this training. I think the issue as to whether there's a subsidy for it is kind of a standalone thing and maybe needs to be done separately.
Okay.
Away from this
Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful. I'll just acknowledge that Councillor Dawson has joined us, and thank you very much. We are actually getting to the recommendations for the new Hackney carriage and private hire vehicle licensing policy, and it has been suggested that we perhaps ask Cabinet to consider a discount that could be applied to the taxi drivers for the cost of their BTEC, which is £150 per person, and it lasts for 3 years. We have deduced that there are about 200 taxi operators in Babergh, so this would amount to, if it was a full discount, to 30,000, or it could be a proportion of such. That's where we are. And if you'll just excuse me a moment, I just need to have a drink of water. Oh, Councillor Beer, you carry on while I'm doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I'm not happy about us offering a discount because in lots of private industry, people who have qualifications have to renew them or resit them, and they have to pay them. And sometimes their companies will help them out. But if not, it is down to them. It certainly was in the profession that I was in. It was down to me. No one else would pay it. So I don't think that should be subsidised by the council. But I do think it should be 4 years. And I'm going to move that we move the motion that we recommend the officer's recommendation, but alter 3 years to 4 years. And full stop at the question of supporting the costs. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beer. Any comments on that, please, or anyone wish to second that? Councillor Beer, I'm very sorry to say that you don't have a seconder, so I'm very sorry to say this. So we will go back to the original recommendation. I think to see.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Carpendale wishes to say something.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered if it might help you if I actually moved that recommendation to Cabinet, so at least we've got something on the table. And then should members wish to, or should you wish to, perhaps not even an amendment, but possibly a second recommendation that you might want to discuss. So if I move the recommendation that's on the paper.
Right, Councillor Carpendale has proposed. Is there a second? And a second from Councillor Ayres. Thank you. Any other comments so far? Well, I will ask the governance officer to read out the proposal that's on the table at the moment, which is the recommendation. Apologies, but the legal officer is just having a word. Thank you, Governance Officer Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You'd like me to read out the recommendations?
Yes, please.
Okay. 3.1, that the post-consultation draft Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Licensing Policy, attached as Appendix A to the report, be approved, and a recommendation to Cabinet, 3.2, that the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Licensing Policy document be adopted.
Thank you. And if I can just ask the legal officer, we can then make a recommendation, or we can ask for a proposal for Cabinet after voting here. Would that work?
Yes, I think that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. So the vote will now be open, if the computers are still on. Thank you. I ask the Governance Officer to organise the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just apologise to Councillor Dawson? You won't be able to vote as you weren't here for the entire item. Thank you. Sorry. Councillors, if you could please open the vote in the app, and the vote for this item will now show in blue.
Sorry, Councillor Carpendale, are you having a bit of difficulty?
I can take your vote verbally, Councillor Carpendale, if you like.
Thank you.
That's 4 votes for and 1 against, Chair.
Thank you very much, Karen, for that. So that is carried. Thank you. We now speak, if we can, members, as to whether we are going to ask Cabinet to consider a subsidy, discount, whatever one would like to call it, for the taxi drivers. We could ask that this is for this year only, which is my suggestion. It doesn't have to be everybody's. I'm willing to listen to members. If anyone has any comment, would they like to comment? Councillor Beer.
So if the 3-year period would start from now, somebody could next week be up on the 3 years, is that correct? And they would then have to take it? Sorry.
Catherine, please.
Sorry, Councillor Beer. No, the policy's yet to be adopted by Cabinet, so it's not until the policy is actually adopted and comes into force that the course requirement becomes mandatory.
Yeah, precisely my point. So let's assume that got to Cabinet and they approved it today. That would come into effect then, and somebody whose 3 years end next week, or the beginning of next month, they would have to sit this test. Is that correct?
Catherine?
That's correct, Councillor Beer, but we have allocated a 6-month period for them to take the assessment, to allow them time to do that.
Right.
Any other comments from members? Councillor Gould, thank you.
Just wondering about my maths here. I think if there's a 3-year, not on affordability either. I think if there's a 3-year gap there, then the subsidy should be on offer for 3 years. Because there could be a taxi driver who starts the opposite from your scenario, Councillor Beer, who actually starts the week before. So they would actually need to be taking the test 3 years, in 3 years' time. So they would perhaps need the subsidy. We'd need the subsidy for 3 years. Does that make sense? To be fully inclusive.
Catherine, did you wish to respond?
Yes, Chair. So from my understanding of what Councillor Gould is saying, if somebody was to be licensed prior to the implementation of the policy, they wouldn't be covered by the allocation that you're proposing. I believe that's what you were saying. Yeah.
Yes, that's it, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you.
So, thank you very much. It does. The suggestion that I am making perhaps may look as though it is slightly, I'm going to use the word skewed, that it will not cover everyone. If we just did it for 1 year, we may suggest that it's done for 3 years, and that there is a budget put towards it. But it's members' consideration of this. Councillor Dawson.
Sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Yes, sorry, if I can just ask, my apologies for being explained quietly.
That's fine.
Can I just ask exactly how much this is going to actually equate to a year? I'm sort of at the back of my mind wondering why we're giving this subsidy, actually. Really, in the big picture, do we really need to give it? Because COVID's, we're coming to an end of COVID, aren't we, etc.
Yes.
And
thank you very much, Councillor. My suggestion has been put forward, that I have put forward, and it doesn't have to be accepted, is because all the responses that we received commented that they have, in the majority, been taxi drivers for many, many years. And why should they undertake this statutory training? It's something that's set by the government. There's nothing that we can do. We cannot set it aside for anyone. And yes, we have had COVID and they have lost money over the last 18 months or so. And it was just a way, I think, of us suggesting to Cabinet and to the taxi trade and to our residents that we are listening to what is happening and we are caring.
sorry, if I can just come back.
Point of clarification, Madam Chairman. You said listening. We're not, because you commented that people have complained about the cost of this, but they've also complained about the 3-year test. You voted that out, voted that in. I wanted it longer. So, you know, that's the picture that we've got. We can alter it, and we chose to go 3 years. We can choose to discount them or not. And I'm of the view that we shouldn't be paying this discount.
Okay, that's fine, and thank you, Councillor Beer, for your comments. Councillor Dawson.
Sorry, if I could come back to my
That was a clarification.
original question. So coming back to my original question, does anybody know exactly, I wasn't here, and why you brought exactly how much this, if we're thinking of doing, how much is this discount per annum in pounds, pence, very simply? Does it equate to?
How much?
No, for each driver.
It's £150 per person for each test. It takes 2 days, so it's 2 days out of their trading as well. And
we're going to subsidise this?
To subsidise it over, and there's a calculation of 200 taxi drivers, and so that would equate to £30,000 if they all took it all in 1 year. And my suggestion was that for this first year only, we supplied a subsidy or a discount, however one would like to put it.
Chairman, just to clarify here, that the proposal here is that it's just put to the Cabinet to consider. I don't think any decision is being made at this committee as to whether a subsidy or a discount will be applied. It's just to be suggested to Cabinet to consider.
Thank you. Thank you.
And what is your thoughts?
Councillor Dawson, have you got anything else to say?
Yes, I'm just interested to know what the thoughts of my colleagues are on this.
Councillor Ayres.
Just a suggestion.
Councillor Dawson, could you switch your mic off? Thank you.
I do think it would be a good idea to financially assist them. However, you could maybe be means tested. Otherwise, you have a big taxi firm would claim it for everyone, and then someone who really needs the help would not get it. So if somebody needed it, maybe they could have a loan to pay it and then pay it back.
In my opinion, that would be complicating things, but I'm waiting for other members. Councillor Gould.
I just wonder what we're trying to do here. Are we trying to stop taxi drivers from going out of business because they can't afford the money for the course? Are we trying to be benevolent? So I just think perhaps we need to give a little bit of thought to what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. Anyone else? Oh, Councillor Gould, back again. Yes,
And an
do.
afterthought, I guess there's no evidence to suggest that by putting this subsidy in, taxi drivers are going to go out of business. There's no evidence to suggest that. And there's no evidence to suggest to the contrary either. So we're actually fumbling around in the dark with no evidence on a completely
Thank you.
arbitrary
Thank you,
thing,
Councillor.
really.
Yes, Catherine, please come in.
Thank you, Chair. This course isn't a new idea either, just to let councillors know that. Every other council within Suffolk is already undertaking this as part of their normal driving procedure, so we're just possibly a little bit behind the curve on this.
And if I can ask you, Catherine, are any councils subsidising it that you know of?
I'm not aware, Chair, but I can go and find that answer out for you.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And do we know whether any of the other councils have the experience that some taxi drivers haven't been able to fund this themselves?
Thank you, Councillor. Unfortunately, again, I'm not 100% aware of that, but I can find out and report that back to committee.
Councillor Gould.
Thank you. It might be useful, and then we could have a little bit of evidence to back up what we're doing or what we're suggesting, what we're debating, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Dawson. Yes.
Yeah, I would agree actually with what Councillor Gould would say. I'm not quite sure, and with Councillor Bitt, why we're actually doing this. And I'm not too concerned, you know, what other councils are doing, because other councils don't offer free car parking, which hopefully in due course we will continue to do. You all know my feelings on that. And, you know, at the end of the day, what we don't want to be doing, we've got to really look at these finances really closely. And my feeling is if we sort of say to somebody, would you like a subsidy? Of course they're going to say yes. You know, I would. But £150 when you're training, you know, think of what students pay when they go to do their degrees at university in a year. So it strikes me £150 actually is, yes, it's nice, but actually that money, I sort of believe, could be spent probably in other places in a much better way, perhaps. So I'd be finding it quite difficult to perhaps endorse this, actually.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. And it has been my suggestion. Has anyone else any comment to make on this? No. Do we need to propose it, or are we just going to vote and see?
Madam Chairman, I'll make a
moment.
proposal then to help you out.
Oh,
That we don't offer this discount.
thank you. Legal officer?
There is a proposal on the table.
There's a
second
proposal.
for it.
Thank you. There's a proposal on the table that we do not offer it. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Dawson. How do we do the vote, Karen, on this one, please? Would you like to do it electronically or by hand?
We can do a vote if Mandy's clear on what we're voting on. We can do a show of hands if that's easier.
The legal officer has said a show of hands. Are members happy with that? Councillor Gould.
Could I just say that we're not offering it? What we were saying was that we were going to suggest that Cabinet discusses it. So we're actually not offering this, but
I've had a
you've had the
proposer
recommendation.
and,
Yes.
a seconder, so we have to. Sorry?
That we don't propose this to the Cabinet.
Your proposal is that we do not
Cabinet.
put it to the Cabinet
If that makes it clearer
about the
for you.
suggestion.
No.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Gould?
That makes more sense.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you. So if we can, Councillor Carpendale.
Say, I think in view of some confusion here, might be helpful if the governance officer actually read out the actual recommendation that we've got.
Thank you. It's not, well, it's not a recommendation, it's a proposal. Do we need to do that, legal officer?
Well, to be honest, you could probably choose not to vote on it. I mean, if it's decided that you don't think it's going to be a successful
Right.
proposal on your behalf to recommend it to Cabinet, if you feel that there is not going to be the support here, I mean, you could just drop the proposal
Okay.
and close the meeting.
Okay. Councillor Carpendale.
I think it would be helpful if Cabinet were made aware of our concerns and that we had considerable discussion about it, but perhaps in the event didn't feel that we should make a proposal or recommendation to them. But I do think it would be good if in the narrative we alerted Cabinet to the fact that there were some concerns about the impact on existing drivers in the short term, if that
Thank
makes
you.
sense.
Legal and governance officer, can we do that?
Well, that could be done just by way of minuting the
Okay.
conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we have some concerns about the suggestion that I put forward, but we will minute that we have discussed it and we are concerned about the cost to the taxi trade. And so on this occasion, we will just now drop my suggestion. And I'm very happy with that. But thank you, everyone, for listening. Is that okay, legal officer? Yes? That's fine. So we've extended the meeting slightly. So we now close the meeting at something like 2:58. And thank you very much all for attending. We appreciate Councillor Dawson making the effort to attend at the end of the meeting. So thank you very much. Thank you.